Hello, good morning. It's 6 o'clock on today's show. Australia's most talked about case in decades comes to a close. Mushroom killer Patterson is sentenced to life in prison.
Plus, whose side are you on? Unions tell the government no backsliding on workers' rights now that Angela Rayner has gone from the cabinet.
It's Monday, the 8th of September. Triple murderer Patterson is sentenced to life in prison and will serve at least 33 years before she can be considered for parole.
Your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust.
Could Madeline McCann have been killed in a hit and run? Sky News tracks down the woman at the centre of the investigation. New Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood meets with US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance on how to stop people smuggling. A blood moon captivates sky watchers around the world. And in sport, Carlos Alcaraz is the US Open champion once again. He defeated rival Jannik Sinner to take both his title and the world #1 ranking. Hello, good morning. It was the small town murder that's become Australia's most talked about case in decades. Patterson has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years for killing her estranged husband's family with poisoned mushrooms she served in a beef Wellington. Outside court, the sole survivor of the deadly lunch thanked the police for their professional, efficient and effective investigation. Nicole Johnson reports.
Convicted triple murderer Patterson has been sentenced to a life behind bars. She must serve at least 33 years.
Your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage. More than that, they had all been good to you and your children over many years, as you acknowledged in your testimony.
The public interest so great that for the first time in its history, Victoria's Supreme Court allowed the sentencing to be broadcast live. The judge saying Patterson attempted an elaborate cover-up.
Instead of informing those treating the Pattersons and Wilkinsons that you had used foraged mushrooms, which you could have done without having to admit that you had deliberately poisoned their meals, you repeatedly denied foraging, insisting that the mushrooms for the beef Wellingtons were sourced solely from Woolworths and an Asian grocery.
Patterson murdered her estranged husband's family at a lunch in July 2023, where she fed them a beef Wellington pie laced with toxic death cap mushrooms. Her father and mother-in-law, Gail and Don Patterson, were killed. Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, also died, though her husband, Ian Wilkinson, survived after a liver transplant. He spoke outside the court.
I want to say thank you to the many people from across Australia and around the world who, through their prayers and messages of support, have encouraged us. I thank the people of the Leongatha and Carrumbara communities in particular. Your thoughtfulness and care has been a great encouragement to us.
Justice Christopher Bill said Patterson lied that she had cancer, lied that the mushrooms accidentally ended up in the mill, gave police a dummy phone and was vague about going to an Asian grocery store.
Your failure to exhibit any remorse pours salt into all the victims' wounds. The children of your direct victims speak of the distress of watching their parents suffer in hospital.
Justice Bill said Patterson has robbed her children of their grandparents and may, for her own protection, spend years in solitary confinement.
And Nicole joins us now from Sydney. Nicole, this case has captivated people well beyond Australia. Do tell us what the atmosphere was like today in court.
Well, of course, there were a lot of people in court. The media was there. It's been packed out. And as we just heard, the Supreme Court of Victoria decided for the first time in its history, in the history of any Supreme Court in this country, to allow a camera in to broadcast the entire sentencing, 45 minutes of it, live across Australia. That is how much interest there has been in this case across the country. And as you said, internationally as well. Now, the judge, Justice Bill, he also mentioned that there hadn't been any real detail about the background of Erin Patterson. No psych reports were offered by her defence or character references, that the background was limited. He said that her offence of murder was in the worst possible category. As we heard, she showed no pity, no remorse. It's likely that she'll spend most of the rest of her life possibly in solitary confinement because she's regarded as a notorious prisoner inside the prison. And for Australians, they have been watching this day in, day out, following it on daily podcasts. A television series is also in the works, so I don't think it will be the end of this case. But for this very small community in rural Victoria, they're still processing all of this. It is a great shock for them to have to come to terms with a case as notorious as this in their small country town, and they are having to deal with that. And as we heard from the judge, the two children of Erin Patterson will grow up knowing that their mother killed their grandparents.
Nicole, for now, thank you. Christian B, the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeline McCann, is set to be released from a German prison next week after serving time for an unrelated crime. He's not been charged in the McCann case and denies any involvement. His release comes as new details have emerged of another suspect, an unnamed German woman, who at one point was investigated by authorities who believed she had killed the missing girl in a drunk driving incident. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt managed to track the woman down.
The Madeline McCann suspect, Christian B, as he's known under privacy laws, is about to be freed from a German jail at the end of a sentence for rape. He's still being investigated over the Madeline case, but he's not been arrested or charged. Madeline vanished in Portugal in 2007. She was on a family holiday in Praia de Luz. One of the village's oldest residents who met the McCann family says everyone in Luz wants to see the case solved.
It still affects people. This was always a safe place. After so many years, it would be good if they solved the case. Only Christian B knows if he killed her or not.
For 6 years, the German drifter has been suspected of abducting and killing Madeline, but there's only circumstantial evidence against him, so he'll be released within days.
We don't want to investigate forever. If there's nothing more to investigate, or if we don't think that we will find some more evidence, then we will stop the investigation, and then we have to decide if we could charge Christian B or not.
Madeline McCann was nearly 4 when she disappeared. She was asleep in a rented apartment at the Ocean Club. She was in a room with her younger twin siblings, and the patio door was left unlocked. Their parents were dining with friends on the complex 60 yards away. There have been many suspects over the years, but they were cleared. In 2018, Sky News was told of a new theory being investigated by Portuguese and British police. We didn't run the story at the time. The theory was this, that Madeline woke up in the family's holiday apartment and managed to open the patio door. Then she wandered out in the dark, stepped into the street, and a passing car hit her and killed her. The suspected driver, we were told, was a German woman who may have been drinking. Police believed she panicked and drove off with the body. We identified the woman and rang her in Germany. She said she wasn't aware she'd ever been investigated as a suspect. The woman told me that German police had called her and she'd been talking to them for over a year, but only about whether she had ever seen Christian B hanging around the McCann's holiday apartment. But she also said that the German police asked her for the SIM card from her Portuguese phone. She said, "Why didn't my friends tell me and call me about this? Do you think I ran her over? I didn't even have a car at the time." Local reports alleged the woman may have borrowed a car. Madeline's mother, Kate, has long insisted her daughter was not strong enough to open a door and 2 gates to get out of the apartment on her own. German police have never formally questioned Christian B. He denies any involvement in Madeline's disappearance. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Portugal.
And you can watch Martin's extended report a little later this hour at around 6:30. I'm going to move on to a bit of politics now. And more than 1,000 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats on Shabana Mahmood's first day as Home Secretary. She's accused people smuggling gangs of wreaking havoc and will today hold her first major engagement with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance on border security. Well, we're joined in the studio by our political correspondent Tamara Cohen this morning. Great to see you. So Shabana Mahmood's first proper day in office is today. She's got a huge challenge on her hands, hasn't she? Potentially, I was thinking, the toughest job in politics. Fight off reform, stop the small boats. It's a huge task.
Yes, I think so. What a day to start as Home Secretary on Saturday. Over 1,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats, taking the total this year to over 30,000, which is the quickest journey to that number in any year, and also about a third higher than it was last year and the year before. So despite everything Keir Starmer came in saying about smashing the gangs and returns agreements and sending people back, which indeed he has, it seems to be just seeing the numbers go up and up and up. 17 small boats carrying all those people on Saturday. Shabana Mahmood, the big winner of the reshuffle. It seems that Keir Starmer knows he needs to get a grip on this issue, not least because voters are very concerned about it and turning to reform. He's judged her to be an effective person to get a grip on it. We heard a lot of briefings over the weekend that she's prepared to think the unthinkable on lots of different things. So her response has been to say this is utterly unacceptable, and she wants to see people being returned to France quickly. She will be meeting with the Home Secretaries of other Five Eyes countries, that's the security alliance, including the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand today, to talk about that. I think what she will need to get a grip on is not just the numbers, but also the people staying in hotels, which, of course, has become a very difficult issue for the government. But how is she going to do this within the same strictures as Yvette Cooper? Is she going to be looking again at major treaties? Is she going to be looking again at the European Convention on Human Rights? There was some suggestions she might be looking at the sort of family life elements of that. I think the question is whether Downing Street will give her the backing to do things very differently and how that will go down within the Labour Party.
OK. For now, Tamara, thank you. Join us at 6:45 for the paper review.
See you
Look forward to it. And another reminder that Sky News will be hosting the immigration debate in Birmingham on Wednesday, and it will be hosted by Sky's Trevor Phillips and representatives of the main parties that will be attending too. But if you scan the QR code, it's on the screen now, you could be in the audience, you could even ask a question. So get involved, scan that QR code and do join us. Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other news now. And TUC General Secretary Paul Novak will urge the government not to water down legislation on workers' rights in his speech to Congress today. He's also calling for a windfall tax on the banks to fund the abomination of the 2-child benefit cap. Mr Novak will be on the breakfast programme a little later this morning at around 9:20. Authorities in New Zealand believe a man who's been on the run for nearly 4 years with his 3 young children has been shot and killed by police. Officers were responding to reports of a robbery in the small town of Waikato. Police say their primary focus now is finding the children. Now, summer is well and truly over, with the Met Office forecasting a rainy autumn. People are being advised to prepare for the risk of flooding, with above average rainfall and wind expected to hit parts of the country in the coming weeks. What a start to Monday, eh? US President Donald Trump was met with a mixed reaction, to be fair, upon his arrival at the US Men's US Open men's final. That was last night, with both boos and cheers ringing out when he appeared on the big screen. Thousands of fans were subjected to additional security measures too because of the president's arrival, and that delayed the start of the match by around half an hour. The tournament, of course, was won by Carlos Alcaraz. Now, France is facing the possibility of having its fifth Prime Minister in less than 2 years. This afternoon, French MPs will debate a vote of no confidence in the country's current Prime Minister, François Bayrou, who, after he proposed a drastic budget that would save around £40 billion, his proposal has been met with considerable opposition, despite experts warning that the EU's second-largest economy faces a Greek-style debt crisis if it doesn't act urgently. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, explains.
Now, so many of France's political problems come back to what's going on in the economy. And, you know, the big picture here is basically if you look at the change in how much people are charging France to lend to it, it's a pretty good metric of just how worried people are, investors out there are about countries. Look, that's where Germany's gone in the last year or so, Greece, Italy. Look at France. So those bond yields for France have gone up higher than most other countries around the world, really striking there. And this comes back to a bigger issue, which is France is really struggling with its budget, struggling to kind of get a budget through Parliament, struggling to get those budgets implemented. This is showing you France's budget deficit. So basically, the lower this line is, this red line, the more the government is borrowing. It kind of wants to get up to that kind of EU deficit limit, and hasn't really managed to do that post-COVID. There was a plan to bring that up, the 2024 plan, to bring that gradually higher. But look at what actually happened. Look at where the line actually went. So it kind of went further into the red. And again, there was another plan to gradually bring that up towards the 3%. Those are the 2025 plans, so the latest plans. But those are the ones that look like they're imploding now. And of course, if they implode, along with the government, then you have that red line basically kind of going lower and lower, the deficit getting to about like 6.1% or so off into the future, which is more or less the highest deficit in most developed economies, higher even than the US under Donald Trump, which is another thing people are worried about out there. But if you look at other countries, you know, look at the UK, look at Spain, look at Italy, they're all heading into what a lot of people would see as safer territory. Whereas France is down there. It's kind of an outlier. It's an outlier too, actually, if you look at total public spending. You know, famously, France spends a lot of money in terms of, you know, its percentage of GDP, but it's really striking here. You know, this is looking across the developed world. France is comfortably the biggest spender. And those plans, those deficit plans that I showed you a moment ago, the whole point of them was to bring that down just a wee bit, a couple of percentage points. But that is so unpopular when you're talking about all the measures involved there, whether it's cutting pensions, cutting public spending, that is a big sticking point. Final thing to note here, you know, one of the things that France has been really proud of in recent years is productivity, the amount of output that they can generate per hour worked. It's just generally speaking, just being stronger than in most other countries. But in recent years, that's kind of changed. So this is showing you the OECD average, so that's rich countries. There's the EU. Look at the French line. So that has been really falling sharply. And for a lot of people, that is the deeper concern. So on top of everything else, you have weak productivity, which basically feeds into all of those deeper economic problems.
Stargazers across the world have been treated to a rare spectacle. A total lunar eclipse resulted in a blood moon dominating the sky for the first time since 2022. This was the view from parts of London where viewers could catch a glimpse of the phenomenon during a partly cloudy night. The weather hampered that here in London. Elsewhere, these pictures are from Jerusalem. There you go, where the lunar eclipse could be seen rising over the dome of the rock in the old city. Very beautiful. And this was my favourite. This was the view from the night sky from Cyprus. The blood moon spectacle is visible when the Earth passes directly between the moon and the sun, transforming the surface into a deep shade of red. Almost poetic, isn't it? Beautiful. Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we'll have all the latest reaction as Australia's mushroom murderer is jailed for life with a minimum term of 33 years.
It's the country's #1 issue right now. Many are alarmed about their changing communities.
It's an invasion, isn't it?
I think that solution comes through dialogue, not ranting off.
We don't know who they are. I don't think that there's an issue.
But are the people who matter listening? We'll bring key leaders together to debate the crisis that's dividing the nation. The immigration debate on Sky News. Get the full story first.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here, drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Well, let's return now to Australia and the life sentence handed to 50-year-old Erin Patterson after she was murdered. 3 of her relatives had attempted to kill one other with a beef Wellington lunch, and it was laced with death cap mushrooms. Let's go live now to Australia and speak to Penelope Leash, a reporter from 9 News Melbourne. Great to have you with us this morning. This case, as I've said earlier, has captivated people well beyond Australia, Penelope. From your front row seat, what struck you the most during sentencing?
I think what has struck so many people is that Erin Patterson, despite the fact that we've seen during, particularly when she very early on spoke to the media, quite a few tears, or at least what she thought were tears in front of the media, that she's shown really no emotion during her last few appearances. And certainly today, she was being handed this life sentence, told that she won't be eligible for any sort of parole until she is at least in her early 80s, that she just really didn't react. She often had her eyes closed, not really looking at the judge at all. We saw her nod at one point, appearing to acknowledge when it was noted that these were very good people that she killed, and she shook her head when her children not being at this meal, when it was noted by the judge that he felt that that was certainly a deliberate act, as the jury had found in finding that she deliberately had her in-laws over to her home to discuss a fake cancer diagnosis, and said that she wanted to know how to break that news to her children, that she used that to essentially lure them into her home to feed them this poisoned beef Wellington lunch. And other than that, there really wasn't a lot of emotion from Erin Patterson, other than scowling at members of the media as she left the courtroom, the Supreme Court at least, for the final time.
Penelope, talk to me a little bit about this case and why you think it's gripped the imagination of so many. Do you think, you know, perhaps maybe it was the mushroom mystery, the betrayal of trust, or the sheer, I suppose, strangeness of it all?
I think definitely the murder weapon poisoning, the use of death cap mushrooms, a naturally growing mushroom, but they're introduced here into Australia and they are indeed very, very deadly, as the name suggests. I think that really did draw a lot of interest from people. The fact that Erin Patterson also is a woman, we don't often see female serial killers. And as you said, it is a huge betrayal of trust. That's what was noted by the judge today too. That's one of the biggest aggravating factors in this case, and that's led to this sentence, is that she completely betrayed the trust of these people who she claimed to love, who she was related to by marriage, and who had only ever been good and kind to her. There's also no motive. There's never been a motive really put forward. And the judge noted today, in some cases, you just never know. Only she can know why she did this. And at this point, she still claims it was all an accident and that she is innocent.
I think that's one of the really fascinating parts of the case, the motive from Erin Patterson. What's your reflections when you look back covering this? What do you think will stay with you long after we all leave the headlines behind?
I think one of the biggest things we see in so many cases is often when things end in murder, it is sadly a need for control that people seem to be trying to exercise in whatever way they can. And it certainly seems Erin Patterson has this huge need for control. We saw her when she was cross-examined on the witness stand during her trial, correcting the prosecutor, trying to out-lawyer the lawyers, really, rather than just being a witness. And I think that's what's really stood out to a lot of people. And I think also just the complete tragedy of it all. These are absolutely good, kind people who loved Erin Patterson, who have done many good things for their community. And not only the families of John and Gail Patterson and Heather and Ian Wilkinson, not only have they been absolutely ripped apart by what's happened, but their whole community and broader elements of the community have been really tragically affected by this through no choice of their own. So I think, unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is just an extremely tragic situation that three people lost their lives when absolutely they never should have been in a position to have been poisoned by this woman who they thought they could trust. And Ian Wilkinson, his life has also been changed forever. While he did miraculously survive, he has ongoing health implications from this and has to live without his wife and with the trauma of what's happened to him and the rest of his family.
OK, we'll leave it there. Penelope, thanks so much for that update there and insight into the case, Erin Patterson being sentenced to life in prison. Well, still to come on The Breakfast Show. After a short break, we'll be talking about this as the prime suspect in the Madeline McCann case. Investigation is set to be released from prison. Sky News tracks down another individual previously suspected of being involved in the disappearance. We'll have that full report after the break. And then coming up in the sport, the full story is Rory McIlroy roars to victory. This is at the Irish Open, claiming his first trophy since that historic Masters victory in April.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Oof. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
He's crazy.
It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. Christian B., the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeline McCann, is set to be released from a German prison next week after serving time for an unrelated crime. He's not been charged in the McCann case and denies any involvement. Now, his release comes as new details have emerged of another suspect, an unnamed German woman who at one point was investigated by authorities who believed she had killed the missing girl in a drunk driving incident. Our crime correspondent Martin Brandt managed to track the woman down, and a warning, his report contains flash photography.
Prior to Luge, on the Feast of the Holy Bath, and in the traditional midnight dip, villagers wash away their demons. In the village church, the priest acknowledges there's a demon that still hangs over the resort. The mystery of Madeline McCann, who vanished in Luge 18 years ago.
Today it's a subject we try not to talk about much because it's so sensitive. People in the village are very certain. Everyone is convinced of what happened. But there's fear of addressing the case because it seems there were attempts to silence possible truths from the beginning. But Maddie hasn't disappeared from our hearts, and I don't think she will.
The Madeline suspect, Christian B., as he's known under privacy laws, is about to be freed from a German jail at the end of a sentence for rape. One of the village's oldest residents who met the McCann family says everyone in Luge wants to see the case solved.
It still affects people. This was always a safe place. After so many years, it would be good if they solved the case. Only Christian B knows if he killed her or not.
For 6 years, the German drifter has been suspected of abducting and killing Madeline. There's circumstantial evidence against him, but not enough to arrest and charge him. So he'll be released within days, according to the German prosecutor now in charge of the Madeline case.
Es gibt keinen Haftbefehl in Sachen Madeline McCann.
There's no arrest warrant in the Madeline McCann case because, in our view, the evidence is not strong enough. Therefore, there's no basis for further imprisonment. For us, he's still the only suspect in the case. We continue to assume that he is responsible for her disappearance and ultimately also for her death.
Madeline McCann was nearly 4 when she disappeared on a family holiday in 2007. She was asleep in a rented apartment at the Ocean Club. The young girl was in a room with her younger twin siblings, and the patio door was left unlocked. Their parents were dining with friends on the complex 60 yards away. The first suspect was a local man, Robert Murat. He was later ruled out. Then Madeline's parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were accused of covering up her accidental death.
No charges have been brought against them.
They too were cleared.
The investigation continues.
Another suspect was former Ocean Club employee Euclides Montero. DNA tests excluded him. 4 local men were questioned over the suspicion of a burglary gone wrong. They were eliminated. In 2018, Sky News was told of a new theory being investigated by Portuguese and British police. We didn't run the story at the time. The theory was this, that Madeline woke up in the family's holiday apartment and managed to open the patio door. Then she wandered out in the dark, stepped into the street, and a passing car hit her and killed her. The suspected driver, we were told, was a German woman who may have been drinking. She panicked and drove off with the body. The night before her disappearance, her parents said Madeline had woken up crying, and the next day she had asked where they had been. Part of the theory is that she might have gone looking for them. Another piece of the puzzle around the female suspect was a conversation overheard at an apartment nearby. A man with an English accent, her boyfriend it was thought, asked her, "Why did you bring her here?" The woman suspect went back to Germany. Her boyfriend returned to England, and he later died. 3 months ago, a Portuguese newspaper ran the hit-and-run story without naming the couple. The headline said German authorities refused to investigate it because Christian B had just emerged as a suspect. We identified the woman and rang her in Germany. She said she wasn't aware she'd ever been investigated as a suspect. German police did ask her repeatedly, she said, about Christian B. But had they been fishing for more? The woman told me that German police had called her and she'd been talking to them for over a year, but only about whether she had ever seen Christian B hanging around the McCann's holiday apartment. But she also said that the German police asked her for the SIM card from her Portuguese phone. I also sent the woman the Portuguese newspaper report of the hit-and-run theory. She said she hadn't seen it. She said, "Why didn't my friends tell me and call me about this? Do you think I ran her over? I didn't even have a car at the time." Local reports alleged the woman may have borrowed a car. I've also spoken to her late partner's family in England, and they told me that detectives from Scotland Yard's Madeline squad have been in touch with them. Madeline's mother, Kate, has long dismissed the whole idea of her daughter managing to get out of the apartment alone. She doesn't accept Madeline could have opened a patio door, a child gate, and the small garden gate there at the time, and carefully close all 3 behind her, as she wrote in her book. What 3-year-old do you know who would do that? It appears the hit-and-run theory was abandoned as police began investigating Christian B, a man with convictions for rape and child sex abuse. A search of scrubland near Pradeluge in June was a final bid by German investigators to find forensic evidence to link Christian B with Madeline's disappearance, but it was fruitless. The Portuguese lawyer who once defended him over diesel theft in the Algarve said Christian B will not enjoy his time as a free man.
Well, I believe that his life is not going to be good at all. Not just because of the crimes that he committed and he had been in jail for, but also because everyone, when they see him on the street, wherever he is, they will always connect him to the case of Madeline McCann.
As Christian B prepares to leave jail, the prosecutor is urging a judge to restrict his movements, a tag, a curfew, perhaps a travel ban.
We don't want to investigate forever. If there's nothing more to investigate, or if we don't think that we will find some more evidence, then we will stop the investigation, and then we have to decide if we could charge Christian B or not.
How are you? If the suspect was to return to Portugal, there's one former acquaintance who won't welcome him.
I think he's a danger to society. It's going to put a lot of children and women vulnerable again. He's an injurious monster as far as I'm concerned, from what I've found out over the years. and from even being about, I mean, he was a disgusting man, even when he was on the beaches flaunting himself and just naked there, lying advertising. No, this guy's not suitable to be released.
For all that's been said about Christian B, for all the theories, the Madeline mystery may never be solved, according to a former Portuguese detective.
Unfortunately, this is a case that will haunt us throughout history. I would honestly like this case to be closed tomorrow, even to give everyone and the main people involved peace. But given the time that has passed, I think this is a case that will remain unsolved. Unless the perpetrator confessed to what happened, we won't know what happened.
Remarkably, Christian B has never been formally questioned by German police about Madeline. He's admitted he's made mistakes in his life, but he insists he had nothing to do with her disappearance. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Portugal.
Well, Martin's full report is on the Sky News website, including a really excellent read, so do take a look at that. But let's take a look at your sport now.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The club made a great pitch to me, that they wanted me. They gave me a 4-year contract. All the stops were out. They made me feel really welcome.
We arrived at the airport there in Madrid, and there were 50, 30, 40, 50 journalists, cameras, and we thought, oh, they come for this movie star, you know? Suddenly we see, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, it's for you.
It's always difficult losing a great player. Jimmy, for me, was always a world-class striker. Probably not talked about as much, I don't think, as to some of the other great strikers, but I was fortunate enough to play with him.
We obviously made a very good profit on him. If you just take the business transaction, not the football emotion, the transaction was a good deal because we bought him for 2 and we sold him for £12 million.
In 2 years, got 6 times their money. I was not a big earner at the time at the club. So for them, it was a big gain.
He's settling into his new surrounds, the player renamed Judas Floyd Money in the Bank when he was drummed out of Ellen Road. But stories of excessive demands were fictional, according to Atletico's new signing.
I was supposed to stay there. I was supposed to sign a new contract and feel happy. If they can ask 12 million for a player, the rest is all clear.
Were you asking to be the most highly paid player in the Premiership, as we're led to believe?
No, don't believe the figures at all. Don't believe the figures at all.
You didn't want £40,000 a week? Would have been nice, but is that what you were demanding?
That's not what I asked.
Reading the text last night, that was nothing about money from his agent. Well, Jesus, lads, honestly, if that wasn't about money, I don't know then. Maybe I'm getting it wrong when he said me there. A lot of you have written good articles about it. And all I'd like to say is that I've seen quotes of 45,000. I think you're being modest to Jimmy on that one, honestly. I wouldn't like to say, but I think you'd be disappointed if you're only saying that, honestly.
Did you feel you had to speak out publicly for the club?
Yes, you have, because we didn't want to sell a top player. I had one of the best number 9s that you could wish to have.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show. After the break, we'll be discussing stories making news today with our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comments on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Welcome back, everyone. As you can see, Tamara Cohen's here. We're going to look in the papers for you. We'll start with The Guardian tomorrow because I'm a little bit obsessed with this deputy leader contest that essentially starts today. The front page of The Guardian, maybe a message to number 10, Keir Starmer. Stop making mistakes, Starmer warned, by senior Labour figures, and to kind of curb the mishaps that we've seen time after time. Because there is a huge worry, isn't there, that MPs feel like they're not being listened to, and potentially that this contest could be a moment of introspection for the party as a whole, and how much this might be a reset of the story that Labour can tell.
Yeah, I think there is concern that there's been this comprehensive reshuffle of everybody in their cabinet jobs, but how does that change what Keir Starmer is doing and how successful he is at it? I think that is what Labour MPs want to see. We had a couple of senior Labour figures like Emily Thornberry, now not in Keir Starmer's top team, but chairing
what was she
Foreign
saying?
Affairs Committee.
Do you think she was quite cutting?
She basically said we are at risk of just handing over power to Nigel Farage if we don't, improve things. You also had Andy Burnham, now of course Mayor of Manchester, saying he wants the government to do things differently. Where a lot of interest is fixating is on this deputy leadership contest. So Angela Rayner vacated that role. Today we'll hear exactly how the contest will happen and, crucially, how quickly it will happen. And I think there may be quite a variety of candidates running in there, and I think the risk is it becomes a bit of a referendum on how where the party is going. Are they going to the right or are they going to the left?
That's what I find
this
really
reshuffle is perceived as a bit of leaning to the right, and so I think if a very left-wing person is elected to that role, they don't become deputy prime minister because David Lammy's got that job, but they could be a bit of an issue for Keir Starmer. So I think the leadership will not be, trying to sort of impose their own favoured candidate there. They will let the contest run, but it could be a difficult one.
Well, talking of that reshuffle, let's shuffle over to, this is the Daily Mail.
And I wanted to do this one because Shabana Mahmood is the new Home Secretary. She is the most important appointment of this reshuffle. It looks like the whole reshuffle's done with a view to making her Home Secretary. Now, the right-wing newspapers are very concerned about migration, and thought this profile of her in the Daily Mail was quite interesting. It says, Mahmoud is impressive, but she's fighting with both hands tied behind her back. Now, they talk about how she is, you know, a real political operator. They talk about this profile people often bring up in which she said that Margaret Thatcher was one of her political heroes. She also grew up in a corner shop in Birmingham. She's said to be, you know, very angry that her own family came here, did things the right way, and she sees people abusing the system. But I think the question they're asking is, we have Keir Starmer, of course, human rights lawyer. We have Richard Hermers, the Attorney General. How much are they going to change the tram lines she operates within? Are they going to sort of reopen conventions and so on, as some Labour MPs want to see? Because otherwise it's going to be very difficult for her, for all her, you know, shrewd and efficient manner to actually make things very different. So I think they're saying we welcome it, but well, let's see what actually happens.
I thought the tone of this was very interesting, considering it's from the Mail, saying Shabana Mahmood is one of the few impressive politicians on the lacklustre Labour front.
I think that's what they call a compliment.
Backhanded compliment. All right, let's move on to the Daily Mirror then. Schools in the middle of a mental health crisis. So this is all coming from Rachel D'Souza,
the Children's Commissioner, who, of course, has I think important to say, she has a remit to visit all schools and head teachers. She often raises these reports on visiting, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of schools, and says basically children who are waiting for services are putting a real strain on schools and teachers. Teachers are having to fill the gap from what we know is this big surge in mental health difficulties, particularly since the pandemic. And she's calling for significant investment. I think the difficulty is that there isn't going to be any extra investment, we don't think, because the government say there isn't enough money for that investment to happen.
Yeah, completely. And I think what's interesting, Dame Rachel D'Souza has quite a refreshing voice, quite a direct voice. She's been on Sky News Breakfast
she is
previously,
very impressive, yeah.
And she's spoken about her utmost respect for banning the smartphone in schools, and really quite direct. She's on the show later today, so it'd be interesting to get her take on that.
The government are trying to increase the numbers of teachers. They've got this target to increase the number of teachers, which some people say they're not going to reach. And I think there is just so many things which are making life very difficult for teachers at the moment.
Yeah, with no extra budgeting for making bigger changes. It's going to be quite overwhelming, quite hard for teachers in the job. Currently.
I picked out this story from the Financial Times.
Financial Times,
because,
take it away.
So it says, unions warn against diluting workers' rights legislation, Rayner championed. So one of Angela Rayner's big jobs in government was workers' rights. This was something they came into government and said businesses must do various things. They must stop the practice of firing and rehiring people. They must give people day one rights. There's been lots of rows about this and businesses concerned about it. I picked this story because there is a line in here where it says, Labour figures said some Downing Street staff were trying to kill key parts of the bill, which business leaders have said will create billions of pounds of red tape on top of recent tax and minimum wage increases. So, question there, are Number 10 now seeing this as an opportunity to make some amendments to that bill? We're already seeing people talking about that. The unions, who are having a conference in Brighton at the moment, will be very angry if that happens. So is that a battle that Keir Starmer is going to have, and will he succeed in it?
We'll have to see. We've got Paul Novak on the show later today too. I just wonder, just reflect on this slightly. Will this be Angela Rayner's legacy, the workers' right bill, her lasting legacy?
Well, she saw it as one of the key things she did alongside house building, well, getting it going, although many say there was no chance of reaching her target there of 300,000 a year. She was in that department. There was another minister below her, Justin Madders, who was also really championing this, and he was moved aside as well. There were already amendments being put into this bill. This has caused a lot of anger, remember, with the Birmingham bin strike, where the workers were fired and then rehired. So this is something that the unions could make a lot of trouble for Keir Starmer about if they go down that road. But businesses are very concerned about it.
Fascinating. All right, leave that one there. Let's move on now. This is in the Daily Telegraph, Tamara, and it's all about the National Trust and the types of people signing up to the National...
Associated often with the older end of the spectrum.
Yes, and new parents. I remember signing up on maternity to push the buggy around stately homes. But this story is all about young members signing up in their droves.
Surging to visit historic homes and gardens. What do they say? A 35% increase between February last year and March this year in people aged 18 to 25 who are putting their smartphones down and going to National Trust homes. Now, this comes in the context, they say, of a fall in general membership a bit.
Enough.
I mean,
Cost
so
of living crisis.
it's £48 a year for young people, and I think it's about double that for older for us. So it is, you know, for young people, it's a lot more cost effective, and be interested to know which ones they're going to. But there is a 35% increase is a serious increase.
Yeah,
so
and one of the biggest pools for young people, and we're talking 18 to 25 here, their biggest pool is to get a sense of calm, to be able to switch off social media and the smartphone and be at one in nature. But the amount of people that you see walking around a lovely National Trust site with phones to post on social media.
Oh, I know, to post on Instagram, I know. Well,
I'm
we'll
not
have
sure
to check
about
whether
this.
that's really going to be the sort of break from social media that we anticipated. I wonder if they go to the more Instagram-worthy one.
I know I'm a victim of that. I do it all the time. Can you talk to me about... This is a story in The Guardian.
This is a story...
This is fascinating, isn't it?
This is the London-born teenager declared a saint by Pope Leo. This story's had a lot of coverage, and it's so interesting. So, a youngster born in London, but of Italian parents, has been made a saint. He died tragically aged 15 of cancer and is judged to have carried out a couple of miracles, been canonised by Pope Leo. Huge crowds in St Peter's Square. People were genuinely moved. But there's this whole debate about whether the Roman Catholic Church is doing this to attract younger members and, you know, the process that he had to go, expensive process he had to go through to become a saint, but people were very moved by it, and it's an incredible story. They call him God's influencer. He was a teenage gamer who used his interest in that in order to get people interested in Catholic teachings.
Yeah.
Now been made a saint.
Yeah, however you think about it, he's got this iconic image that's forever posted on social media too. Thanks for your company. We're back at the top of the hour with Wilf.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Good morning. At 7 o'clock on today's show, Australia's most talked about case in decades comes to a close. Mushroom killer Erin Patterson sentenced to life in prison.
Plus, whose side are you on? Unions demand no backsliding on workers' rights now that Angela Rayner has gone from the cabinet. We'll speak to the government shortly.
And did you see the blood moon? We'll show you images of the lunar eclipse that captivated skywatchers.
It's Monday the 8th of September. Your headlines. Triple murderer Erin Patterson is sentenced to life in prison and will serve at least 33 years before she can be considered for parole.
Your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage.
Could Madeline McCann have been killed by a hit and run? Sky News tracks down the woman at the centre of the investigation. New Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood meets with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance on how to stop people smuggling. And say goodbye to summer. Forecasters warn of rain, gales and floods ahead. A very good morning to you. It was the small town murder that became Australia's most talked about case in decades. Erin Patterson has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years for killing her estranged husband's family with poisoned mushrooms. She served in a beef Wellington. Outside the court, the sole survivor of the deadly lunch thanked police for their professional, efficient and effective investigation. Nicole Johnson has this report for us.
Convicted triple murderer Erin Patterson has been sentenced to a life behind bars. She must serve at least 33 years.
Your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage. More than that, they had all been good to you and your children over many years, as you acknowledged in your testimony.
The public interest so great that for the first time in its history, Victoria's Supreme Court allowed the sentencing to be broadcast live. The judge saying Patterson attempted an elaborate cover-up.
Instead of informing those treating the Pattersons and Wilkinsons that you had used foraged mushrooms, which you could have done without having to admit that you had deliberately poisoned their meals, you repeatedly denied foraging, insisting that the mushrooms for the beef Wellingtons were sourced solely from Woolworths and an Asian grocery.
Erin Patterson murdered her estranged husband's family at a lunch in July 2023, where she fed them a beef Wellington pie laced with toxic death cap mushrooms. Her father and mother-in-law, Gail and Don Patterson, were killed. Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, also died, though her husband, Ian Wilkinson, survived after a liver transplant. He spoke outside the court.
I want to say thank you to the many people from across Australia and around the world who, through their prayers and messages of support, have encouraged us. I thank the people of the Leongatha and Currumbara communities in particular. Your thoughtfulness and care has been a great encouragement to us.
Justice Christopher Bill said Patterson lied that she had cancer, lied that the mushrooms accidentally ended up in the mill, gave police a dummy phone and was vague about going to an Asian grocery store.
Your failure to exhibit any remorse pours salt into all the victims' wounds. The children of your direct victims speak of the distress of watching their parents suffer in hospital.
Justice Bill said Erin Patterson has robbed her children of their grandparents and may, for her own protection, spend years in solitary confinement.
Well, Nicole joins me now live from Sydney. Nicole, what has been the reaction there in Australia to this extraordinary case as it wraps up? And it sounds like quite a full sentence. Is it, by Australian standards?
It was no surprise that it was a life sentence. The big question, of course, was how long would she have to serve? It's 33 years. The reaction in Australia, Australians have been following this day in, day out. 2 years almost of investigations, 9 weeks of trial, 6 days of jury deliberations. Many Australians will be happy to put this case behind them, but I don't think it's the last time we'll hear about it. There have been ongoing daily podcasts. A television series is in the works. Netflix is now looking into it. But aside from all of that, it is the small town of Leongatha in Victoria that's going to have to come to terms with what has happened in their community, something that has affected multiple families and multiple generations, a great deal of trauma for them going forward. But for Australians, it has really been a case that has captured the imagination of people and gripped the nation.
Nicole, as always, thanks so much, Nicole Johnson in Sydney, for us this morning. Now, more than 1,000 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats on Shabana Mahmood's first day as Home Secretary. She's accused people smuggling gangs of wreaking havoc and will today hold her first major engagement with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance on border security. Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, is here. Tamara, very good morning to you. Not a headline she wants to start with on the first day, just underlines the kind of importance of the job she's got to do.
Yes, what a start for the new Home Secretary. Over 1,000 people came over in 17 boats on Saturday. That is about a third higher than it was last year, and it is a record. So everything the government has been doing so far, taking total
over
30,000. It hasn't reached the 30,000 that quickly in any year since the small boats crisis began about 7 years ago. So she's called it utterly unacceptable. What can she do about it, though, is the question. There's a lot of talk about how Shabana Mahmood is a great political operator. She's prepared to think the unthinkable in perhaps changing conventions, for example, looking at some of the European Convention rights to family life and so on. But Keir Starmer, who appointed her to this important role, wants her to get a grip on this crisis. She's meeting Five Eyes allies today to talk about things like smuggling gangs. But I think what Labour MPs want to see action on is not just the numbers, but also putting people up in hotels. Some big challenges on the new Home Secretary's desk.
Certainly are. We'll be talking to the government, by the way, Luke Pollard from the Defence Department in about 10 minutes' time, so stay tuned for that. And a reminder that we'll be hosting a big debate, the immigration debate in Birmingham on Wednesday, the 10th of September. It's going to be hosted by Trevor Phillips, and representatives of the main parties will be in attendance. Do scan the QR code on your screen now if you'd like to be in the audience and to ask a question. Right, let's get you up to speed now on all of the day's other stories. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you so much, Wilfred. France is facing the possibility of having its fifth Prime Minister in less than 2 years, with French MPs set to debate a confidence vote in François Bayrou this afternoon. The vote follows strong opposition to a proposed budget that would save around £40 billion in an attempt to avoid a dramatic debt crisis. TUC General Secretary Paul Novak will urge the government not to water down legislation on workers' rights in his speech to Congress today. He's also calling for a windfall tax on the banks to fund scrapping the two-child benefit cap. Mr Novak will be on Breakfast programme later this morning at around 9:20. Lots to talk about there. Authorities in New Zealand believe a man who has been on the run for nearly 4 years with his 3 young children has been shot and killed by police. Officers were responding to reports of a robbery in the small town of Waikato. Police say their primary focus now is finding the children.
We are still searching for the children of Tom Phillips. We have not located them at this stage, and we remain as our primary focus to reunite those children and extract them as soon as possible from where they may be. We have children that we believe are unaccompanied in the bush, and it's our priority to locate them.
Summer is well and truly over, with the Met Office forecasting a rainy autumn. People are being advised to prepare for the risk of flooding, with above-average rainfall and wind expected to hit parts of the country in the coming weeks. Christian B., the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeline McCann, is set to be released from a German prison next week after serving time for an unrelated crime. He's not been charged in the McCann case and denies any involvement. His release comes as new details have emerged of another suspect, an unnamed German woman who at one point was investigated by authorities who believed she had killed the missing girl in a drunk driving incident. We'll speak to Martin in a moment about how he tracked down this woman. But first, this is his report.
The Madeline McCann suspect, Christian B., as he's known under privacy laws, is about to be freed from a German jail at the end of a sentence for rape. He's still being investigated over the Madeline case, but he's not been arrested or charged. Madeline vanished in Portugal in 2007. She was on a family holiday in Praia de Luz. One of the village's oldest residents who met the McCann family says everyone in Luz wants to see the case solved.
It still affects people. This was always a safe place. After so many years, it would be good if they solved the case. Only Christian B knows if he killed her or not.
For 6 years, the German drifter has been suspected of abducting and killing Madeline, but there's only circumstantial evidence against him, so he'll be released within days.
We don't want to investigate forever. If there's nothing more to investigate, or if we don't think that we will find some more evidence, then we will stop the investigation, and then we have to decide if we could charge Christian B. or not.
Madeline McCann was nearly 4 when she disappeared. She was asleep in a rented apartment at the Ocean Club. She was in a room with her younger twin siblings, and the patio door was left unlocked. Their parents were dining with friends on the complex 60 yards away. There have been many suspects over the years, but they were cleared. In 2018, Sky News was told of a new theory being investigated by Portuguese and British police. We didn't run the story at the time. The theory was this, that Madeline woke up in the family's holiday apartment and managed to open the patio door. Then she wandered out in the dark, stepped into the street, and a passing car hit her and killed her. The suspected driver, we were told, was a German woman who may have been drinking. Police believed she panicked and drove off with the body. We identified the woman and rang her in Germany. She said she wasn't aware she'd ever been investigated as a suspect. The woman told me that German police had called her and she'd been talking to them for over a year, but only about whether she had ever seen Christian B. hanging around the McCann's holiday apartment. But she also said that the German police asked her for the SIM card from her Portuguese phone. She said, "Why didn't my friends tell me and call me about this? Do you think I ran her over? I didn't even have a car at the time." Local reports alleged the woman may have borrowed a car. Madeline's mother, Kate, has long insisted her daughter was not strong enough to open a door and 2 gates to get out of the apartment on her own. German police have never formally questioned Christian B. He denies any involvement in Madeline's disappearance.
Well, Martin is here with Leah and I now to discuss this further. Really fascinating, particularly this new kind of avenue that has obviously been explored in the past, and that you were aware of that perhaps before many others. Can I just start with where the intro started, which is Christian B. Is he still the prime suspect? If he is, has he already been questioned and they haven't found enough to charge him?
He's the only suspect, according to the German prosecutor, who is now in charge of the case for a number of different reasons, but principally because the suspect is German. He was already in Germany. It's a bizarre situation. The prosecutor has said for the last 4 or 5 years that he's convinced that Christian B., as he's known under the privacy laws, is responsible for Madeline's death. He says he has evidence that Christian B. did it and Madeline is dead, but I mean, he won't share any of that evidence with the media. I guess we're not surprised at that, but not even with with the defence. Now, bizarrely, he's going to be released. And the prosecutor says that to arrest him over Madeline, he would need to be 99% sure of a conviction. It's just an oddity of the German system. To get an arrest warrant, he needs to be 99% sure of a conviction. But to charge him, he needs to be reasonably sure that he would get a conviction. So it's a bit like the UK system, you know, on the balance of probabilities, 51%, you have to feel confident that you would get a conviction and he wouldn't be acquitted. But very basically, the prosecutor says he doesn't have enough evidence, not quite, he says. So Christian B is going to be released. There may be some restrictions put on his freedom, an ankle tag or a travel ban, but we don't know that. That's something that's going to be argued in the courts over the next few days.
So can I'm just really fascinated to dig into this, and you know the differences between German and British approach. So there isn't enough evidence to even question him, or he has been questioned and there's still not enough evidence?
Again, rather oddly, he hasn't been questioned. And when I asked the prosecutor why not, he says, well, he's already told us, or his lawyers have told us, that he won't answer our questions. And the prosecutor hasn't given the defence team any of the evidence that he's got. So Christian B doesn't know what the evidence is. I mean, it's a crazy system. And given everything the prosecutor has said, I mean, you imagine in this country if the Crown Prosecution Service, the DPP, were to damn somebody and accuse them of murder without arresting them or charging them. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to an awful lot of people. And the prosecutor says, yes, he's going to be released, but he's dangerous, he's a danger to society, and we think he will commit more crimes, and they're probably going to be crimes of a sexual nature. Bizarre situation, isn't it?
Bizarre.
It is. And then through your reporting, Martin, this hit-and-run theory of this unnamed German woman, what struck you the most there?
Yes, I mean, this was something I was told about 7 years ago. We didn't run the story at the time because while I was investigating that, Christian B then emerged as a much more important suspect. So the theory, and this was largely pursued by the Portuguese police, was that a German woman, maybe drunk, a woman with a history of alcoholism, had been driving past the Ocean Club, the apartment, and Madeline had somehow got out of the apartment and had been run over by the German woman. Now, it's difficult to see that there's an awful lot of evidence to support that, and certainly Kate McCann has described the idea that Madeline could have got out on her own as nonsense, because there was a closed patio door, a thick curtain, a child gate, and then a garden gate, all of that between the apartments and the road. And Kate said, and she wrote this in her book, what 3-year-old would you know would be capable of doing all that? But that's to assume that that's if you assume that Kate is right and all those things were closed that night.
Really fascinating as always, Martin. Thanks so much. And well worth scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Watch Martin's full report available on the Sky News app. Right, it's time to speak to the government. I'm delighted to welcome now the Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Looks like you're on the bridge of a ship there. Tell us where you are and why.
I am indeed. I'm on the bridge of HMS Mersey, which is one of our offshore patrol vessels. She's moored up in the Docklands in East London for the DSEI trade conference, which is a big defence conference where the UK will be selling our wares, underlining the importance of defence businesses and defence being an engine for growth, creating opportunities in every part of the country. And having the Royal Navy, the RAF, the British Army on show here is an important part of not only selling the incredible new technologies that British companies are developing, but also supporting the defence industrial strategy that we're announcing today that will direct more defence funding at British companies and in particular at British SMEs to create more jobs and to participate and to support the overall growth mission of the government, as well as making our nation safer and stronger in these more dangerous times.
Remind me where we got to with selling our equipment to the EU's new defence fund. Are we explicitly included in that now or not?
So the agreement that we signed with the European Union opened the door to UK participation in what's called SAFE, which is the EU's defence arrangements there. We're having discussions with our EU friends at the moment about what's best to participate in and how best to do that. And we've been clear that we will participate if it's value for money for the British taxpayer and if it supports our defence mission. But it's worth remembering that EU nations are NATO member states as well. And as a government with a declared NATO first approach, securing our own backyard, we're already working with NATO members to create new kit and equipment, and we only need to look at the £10 billion announcement from last weekend for the new Type 26 frigates for Norway that will be built in Scotland. 4,000 jobs secured by that deal, shipbuilding extended on the Clyde by 15 years, to see that when we get these deals right, we can contribute to economic growth in every single part of our country. And that's just the start of our ambition. We want to do even more of those deals. And what we're seeing this week is an important part of showcasing the incredible technology and innovation of British firms in the global marketplace.
Obviously, Norway's not in the EU, though. Let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. Lots more drone attacks over the weekend. In your eyes, is it now OK for Ukraine to respond and hit Russian government buildings?
Well, we've been supporting Ukraine in the fight for a number of years now. In particular, we're keeping the pressure on Putin. Our job as a UK government, as we see it, is to put Ukraine in the best possible position on the battlefield, but also in any future negotiation to come. And that's the reason why we're spending £4.5 billion on support for Ukraine this year, as well as directing that money at British businesses that make the kit and equipment that we then send to Ukraine. Only a few months ago, we announced £1.6 billion missile deal, that missiles manufactured in Northern Ireland that will help shoot down those Russian drones and missiles that are attacking Ukrainian cities. But what we're seeing here is Putin being clear he's not serious about peace. That's why, as an international community, we'll be working with our allies in the US, the G7, the EU, to implement further sanctions on Russia, in particular in their shadow fleet, those fleet of oil tankers that export Russian oil to nations. If we can slow that flow of oil leaving Russia, it stems the flow of money to Putin's illegal war machine and helps our friends in Ukraine.
Small boat crossings over 1,000 on Saturday. The total's now at over 30,000. Is it a national emergency?
Well, last week the PM brought together representatives from across government to be absolutely clear that this is a situation that is not just a Home Office responsibility, it's a cross-government effort. And it's the reason why the Ministry of Defence has deployed military planning teams into the Border Security Command, into the Home Office, to look not only at what contribution we can make to security, but also how we can stand up military and non-military sites for the building of temporary accommodation, adequate accommodation that will enable us to close even more asylum hotels. The PM wants all asylum hotels closed, as do I, as does the British public. And by standing up temporary accommodation on those sites, we can support the closure of those asylum hotels even faster, alongside restarting the processing of asylum applications, something the last government stopped doing unbelievably. And if we can bring down the backlog, which we are already doing, help secure our borders, work with our international partners with new agreements with France and Germany, then we can bring down those crossings, process the applications and close those hotels.
Clearly in the headline numbers of crossings, nothing the government's done yet has worked. You mentioned the agreement with France, and deportations are going to begin imminently. It's expected, though, pretty low numbers relative to the 1,000 that came across on Saturday, or the 30,000 so far this year. I just wonder whether these agreements are worth it versus a more robust approach, simply by the fact that we look at just Saturday, for example, 1,000 that came across. came on 17 boats. Are France actually trying to help us with this problem?
They are, and the agreement that we signed under this government with France will not only enable us to see returns agreements immediately, helping to undermine the business model of the people smugglers. If you get on a small boat and arrive in the UK, you can be turned back and returned, and that's what that agreement said. But also, for the very first time, we secured an agreement from our French friends that they will start tackling French boats in French waters.
But why didn't they stop one of these 17 boats is a lot. Do you not think they could have stopped one of them?
Well, we're working with them more. We've got National Crime Agency officers deployed alongside our French colleagues. There's more that we want to do, and that's why signing this agreement, creating that pilot scheme that the Home Office are working with France on, about not only returns, but also about how we work together to tackle the flow of migrants is so important. But look, we've got a lot of work to do here, but we're making progress. We've returned 35,000 people with no right to be in the UK. We're securing the border with increased legislation. The new counter-terrorism style powers are going through Parliament at the moment. The agreement with France is just about to be activated, and we've just signed an agreement with Germany to help hunt down the stores of small boats that we know are being stored in that country to be used by people smugglers. So we are making progress, as well as seeking to close even more asylum hotels. But there's more work to be done. The Prime Minister is absolutely clear he expects every single government department that can contribute to do so. The MOD is stepping up, and I know that Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, is laser focused on this in her new role.
And we look forward to hearing if there are any changes in policy. It sounds like, based on most of the answers so far, that there isn't yet. Let's touch on your party, and clearly we're just starting to see the agenda, which might be quite swift for the election of your new deputy leader. Can you confirm, is it explicitly decided that the new deputy leader of the party won't be deputy prime minister? And what would be your response to those that will say that suggests the party is no longer democratic if the democratically chosen deputy leader doesn't get a role in government?
Well, the deputy leader of the Labour Party is a party position. I look forward to seeing this contest. Our Labour's National Executive Committee, the body that runs the Labour Party, will decide very shortly on the timescales and the details of that election. And I know that colleagues will want to put forward their names in order to participate in that democratic process that's decided by Labour members. But the PM's appointed a new Deputy Prime Minister in David Lammy. We've got a cabinet that is focused now very clearly on growth, having dealt with the fires that were left by the last government in our first year, the second year in office. The PM's very clear. Our objective now is to focus on the change that people voted for, getting the economy moving. We've already seen the UK having the fastest growth in the G7 in the first half of this year, but our ambition is to go even further. And I think the more that we can focus a debate on how we increase growth, how we make sure it's shared in every single part of the United Kingdom, that's the kind of issues that Labour members want to get under the skin of. That's why I think this debate for the deputy leader of the Labour Party will be a debate focused on the positives of what we can do, about how we can be transformative. And look, as a local MP, I've seen kids now being able to start school with a full belly because of the rollout of free breakfast clubs. There are transformative things that this government is doing, and I hope that the deputy leader debate will enable us to have that discussion about how we can go even faster, engaging and making the case for the policies that we were elected to deliver.
Luke Pollard, good to see you this morning. Congrats on the new role.
Thank you very much.
The Defence Minister for the Armed Forces there. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to be talking more about the situation in Gaza with the former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and a little bit of the internal battles within his old party too, perhaps.
It's the country's #1 issue right now. many are alarmed about their changing communities.
It's an invasion, isn't it?
I think that solution comes through dialogue, not ranting off.
We don't know who they are. I don't think that there's an issue.
But are the people who matter listening? We'll bring key leaders together to debate the crisis that's dividing the nation. The immigration debate on Sky News. Get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up in just a moment, we'll be joined by the former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. But first, Leah's got all of the day's top stories for you.
Thank you, Wilfred. We'll start in Australia because a woman who murdered 3 relatives and attempted to kill another by serving poisonous mushrooms at a family lunch has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 33 years. 50-year-old Erin Patterson, who maintains her innocence, was previously found guilty of serving lethal death-capped mushrooms inside a beef Wellington. The prime suspect in the Madeline McCann investigation, Christian B, is set to be released from a German prison after serving time for an unrelated offence. It comes as Sky News has spoken to a German woman who was once suspected of being involved in the disappearance after details recently come to light of an old hit-and-run theory. And Shabana Mahmood is hosting a meeting with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance today in her first major engagement as Home Secretary. Border security and tackling people smuggling gangs is expected to be the main focus of the meeting.
Now, nearly 900 people were arrested over the weekend in an act of mass civil disobedience against the government's decision to ban Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. Let's get reaction from Independent MP Jeremy Corbyn, who joins me now. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is your message to those nearly 900 people arrested over
They're people of principle and they're people of courage, and they are appalled that civil disobedience should become an act of terrorism. And I was just a few minutes ago looking at a speech, an excellent speech, made by Shabana Mahmood in 2014 of supporting people who opposed the then bombing of Gaza. So I think we need to think about the legislation that's being passed. Protest should be allowed in our country. And indeed, when I, for example, challenged Jack Straw on this in the Terrorism Act 2000, I said, will this criminalise civil protest? He said, no, never.
It's interesting you cite a speech, which I haven't read, obviously, but Shabana Mahmood speaking up against, in the interest of protests against the situation in Gaza, because there's a difference, of course, towards doing that and supporting a proscribed terrorist organisation. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, said yesterday to Trevor Phillips, I would say to those people, voice your concerns, protests on the streets, challenge us as a government to do what we can to relieve the suffering in Gaza, but that does not need to be linked with support for Palestine Action. It's a fair point, isn't it?
Not really, because Palestine Action have been prescribed by the government, and I personally oppose that legislation because I do think in a free democratic society there should be a right to protest. When they went onto the base at Brize Norton, they knew what they were doing. They knew that they would be charged with criminal damage. They knew they'd be charged with criminal trespass. They took that risk. They knew that, but they did it out of principle. They were not involved in bombing anybody. They weren't involved in killing anybody. They weren't involved in threatening anybody's safety. And instead, they've now become a terrorist organisation and threatened with very long terms of imprisonment. I understand their case is not going to get to court until January 27.
But I mean, you can disagree with the fact that Palestine Action has been prescribed, but there have been. I mean, you're a parliamentarian. You can lobby the government to try and change that position, even if it one day proves to be the wrong decision, until or if the decision gets changed. It is illegal.
All those that protested on Saturday knew that, but they wanted to make their case, their point, that they think this law is wrong, and they're protesting against it, knowing they're taking a risk in doing so. Isn't that the great tradition of our country, that people do protest? Suffragettes protested, the Chartists protested. There are
but it wasn't illegal.
Yes, it was illegal. It was illegal to support people in many occasions, and those trade unionists that defied industrial relations legislation in the 1970s.
OK, but then I feel like...
But the point of protest in our society.
Yes, but there's also a terrorist organisation that has been prescribed. I mean, I don't want to try and sensationalise things, but what if someone marched in protest in support of Hamas? I'm sure you would condemn that.
They're not going to do that, are they? Because the people that protested on Saturday were protesting about proscribing an organisation that itself was dedicated to civil disobedience, not terrorism.
But they broke the law. I mean, again, I can quote the Home Secretary yesterday, the Defence Secretary yesterday, who said of Palestine Action, they've been responsible for criminal damage, they've been planning other acts of similar violence, and it was those steps that, advised by the security agencies and the police, that the Joint Terrorism Analysis Unit made the decision to prescribe them. I mean, it's quite a different step. You could still protest the situation in Gaza, as, by the way, you did Thursday, Friday last week with your gathering, in a peaceful way, and land your argument in a way that will bring people along with you.
Look, people went to Parliament Square to protest, as they've done in the past. And many of them were actually very elderly people, including lawyers, vicars, teachers, nurses, doctors, a whole range of people. Surely the government should think for a moment, if this whole range of people are prepared to face a criminal sanction for supporting the right of another organisation to protest that has since been sanctioned by the government as a terrorist organisation, maybe they should just think for a moment, perhaps this prescription of Palestine Action was just a step too far.
And again, I urge people to watch the entire conversation that Trevor had yesterday with John Healey, where he raises that that very legitimate question. But just around this part off...
Phillips raised that question.
Yes, that's what I meant, if I misquoted it. To round this part off, just really interested in your take here. It sounds to me like you are encouraging people, or certainly applauding them for taking this step, which is essentially applauding them for breaking the law, but you're not doing it yourself on an issue you care about. So how do we square those two things? If this is the right course of action of people to protest the broader issue, despite the legitimate points from the Defence Secretary of the nuance that you could do it in another way, why aren't you doing it yourself?
I'm at lots of protests, and I'll carry on being at lots of protests. Look, let's look
But you encourage people to break the law.
No, I said I respected them for going there. I respected their principles. I know quite a lot of the people that are there, constituents of mine. They're people of deep moral conviction and principle. Can't we just accept that there are people of deep moral conviction who are not prepared to see fellow citizens made into terrorists because they protested against the bombardment of children in Gaza? Can't the government think for a moment, maybe they've just got it wrong on this legislation?
But you won't go that far yourself.
Let's see what happens.
Let's talk about the reshuffle, if we may. Are you surprised that the next leader of the Labour Party won't be Deputy Prime Minister?
It is... well, they could be, I suppose, couldn't they? We don't know who the next deputy leader is.
You mean
if
David Lammy runs and wins?
Well, I don't know who the deputy leader is going to be. I don't even know who's going to run. They might even manage to concoct a situation where there is no election and they get a sufficient number of nominations to corral off anybody else from standing in the Parliamentary Labour Party. I honestly not sure I can help you there.
Your old friend and colleague Emily Thornberry saying yesterday she's considering it. Do you think she should run for the deputy leadership?
That's up to her, but I think the Labour Party needs to think very carefully about what it's achieved in the past year in government, like continuing with the two-child benefit cap, like the taking away the winter fuel allowance, then reinstating it, and like the continued attack on personal independence payments for people with disability. There's some really bad news they've done in the past 12 months. They haven't done much to redistribute wealth. They haven't done much to empower people. And indeed, the public cynicism of this government is pretty deep.
I mean, some people are stepping back from the reshuffle to ask the question as to whether it will mean a renewed attempt to reform welfare payments, a renewed attempt for a harder line on small boats policy, and possibly to water down the Employment Rights Bill. What's your take on that?
I suspect they may well be right on that. The endless discussion about small boats and refugees, rather than looking at the human issues of people involved in that, the people who are the victims of that, is actually empowering Nigel Farage and the far right in our society. Surely the government is capable of making the moral case for dealing with asylum seekers by recognising them as human beings in a desperate situation. They're not doing that. Instead, they're trying to criminalise people because they've crossed the channel.
What would be your policy, your new party's policy on the small boats issue?
I think what we want to do is have agreements across Europe on looking at the source of people seeking asylum and ensure that they don't have to undertake these horrendous journeys and can make applications elsewhere. The numbers of people actually arriving are much smaller than the number of people that actually leave Afghanistan in the first place. But I do think we also need to look at, they're not all from Afghanistan, of course, but those that are from Afghanistan have often even worked for the British Army. Their families have been fingered by both the Taliban, the warlords, and they're in a very dangerous and desperate situation. We have some responsibility in this. We, after all, were involved in the Afghan war for 10 years. 20 years.
I would say that, approaching a conciliatory deal with various European countries is broadly what the government has tried to do. And clearly, maybe it will work. It hasn't worked yet. Because 30,000 have crossed this year. It's the fastest pace that milestone's been reached. And I guess, to your point, maybe there are much higher numbers coming into Europe as a whole, but 30,000 is still a lot. Is your point that we have to take our fair share and it might be more than 30,000?
Well, you have to make sure that all the European countries sign up to it. I used to be a member of the Council of Europe in the last Parliament, and we discussed this at great length in Europe with parliamentarians from all over Europe. It's not the EU, this is Council of Europe, which is separate. We discussed all this at great length. And the problem is that there's a rise of far-right populism across Europe and in this country with Farage. And too many politicians are just frightened of this and not prepared to stand up for it and not prepared to stand up for the European Convention on Human Rights or indeed a sensible and fair policy towards refugees. Why are we demonising refugees, putting them in hotels with virtually no money, waiting around for a very long time for a decision? These are often people that have great skills that we actually need in our society. We have, 300,000 vacancies in the care sector. We have many more vacancies within the National Health Service. We have people ready and able to work.
I mean, those two particular sectors, though, obviously require very clear qualifications under British law. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt of the 30,000 that have come in this year, as you said, I'm sure many of them, if not all of them, are very skilled and could work if possible, but I doubt they're doctors.
No, they're not. Unlikely that very many, if any of them, would be doctors, but many would be well able to undertake care work, for example, and to train and qualify. Why don't we, instead of sending people to do nothing in hotels for a long time, think about them to get their cases processed quickly, and if they win the case and meritorious of staying, allow them to train and work. We need skilled workers in this country. We have a labour shortage in almost every industry.
Jeremy Corbyn, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to take a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, we'll be joined by the Children's Commissioner to discuss issues in England's schools.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. The government is facing fresh calls to deliver urgent help for schools struggling to support the wider needs of students not being met by local services. Now, the Children's Commissioner will today unveil a blueprint for the next great wave of education reform to better help support schools. Well, we're pleased to say that Dame Rachel D'Souza, the Children's Commissioner for England, joins us now. Great to see you. So set out your vision, set out your plan.
Well, look, let me tell you where it started. So I'd heard from 1 million children who were telling me they wanted to be in school, they wanted to do well, but they had needs and concerns that they couldn't meet. So I decided to go out and, for the first time ever, use my statutory powers on head teachers and find out exactly what their biggest concerns and worries were. And it's really shocking. About 90% of head teachers responded to me. That's nearly everybody. And they basically told me they were more worried about the funding of wider services than they were about their own funding. They were massively worried about children with special educational needs, children in poverty, and the support around children that we know we need to actually get them into school. And in fact, lots of schools were providing those. They were happy to provide those, but they were feeling like we need support and more help. So the answer has got to be us all getting together locally and really rethinking how we do things. And I've laid out a lot of those answers in my report today.
Just define for me that they were more concerned about wider services, but not their own funding. So what's the difference?
Yeah, so they're funded to deliver education for children. They were worried about mental health services, special educational needs, money from local authorities, for children in health. And that's the bit that has really declined over the last 10 years. So I was a head teacher for 20 years, and, you know, schools have moved on amazingly, and, the quality of education's great. And, you know, we have government talking about we need changes to the curriculum. No, actually, Head's doing a great job. What we need are, the support to get children into school. We need to make sure Heads didn't even know. Things have fallen apart so much. Heads didn't even know how many homeless children they had in their schools, how many children who had a parent in prison, how many children waiting for mental health assessments, because the systems are so fragmented, they're not talking to each other. So that's one of my major recommendations, is we need a proper unique identifier, which sounds really technical, but it's like every baby at birth gets their red book. We need that digitised and to go with a child through life so that we can see who needs help, who needs support, and how are we doing it locally.
The challenge, though, from what you're saying, it feels like it lies beyond just the classroom and good teachers and good heads, of whom there are many.
Yeah.
So how do you go about tackling that?
So look, I wouldn't come here unless I had a proper answer for you for that. First of all, I think heads are incredibly important. They have held the system together, and it's not that we want their teachers teaching, right? But it's not that they have to deliver it all, but schools are where children tell us they want to receive support. So we need to get the services really supporting them. Now, I actually I've worked really hard in Manchester on an attendance alliance, and we got together under Andy Burnham. We got together, and I was the independent chair of the attendance alliance. We got together the police, the dentists, the healthcare, the nurses. Do you know only 1 in 5 schools now have a school nurse? The nurses. We got children's social care. Everyone together with 420 head teachers, and we said, children's attendance is everyone's job. How can we actually really work together to support the children? We're currently spending money in ways, because of old legislation, that are just not helping children. If you look at special educational needs, right, children wait years to get a diagnosis, and that unlocks health. It's crazy. We're spending a fortune on taxis to send children hours away from home for specialist education. I'm proposing today a complete rethink of how we're spending that money. Children want to receive support in their local school. They want to go to their local school with their friends. We need to put the specialist support in there. Less money on taxis, more money on specialist support in local schools. So you can grow up with your friends, and feel, kids don't want to be called special.
Obviously, a big part of some of these things would require sort of rewiring of some services that are paid for by
Massive,
local government
yes.
versus Westminster. What's the response? What's your hope that things that complicated will be embraced by the government?
So for the first time, I think I am hopeful. I have done this plan on purpose just before the white paper on schools and special educational needs is coming out. And we have talked to everybody about our really ambitious reforming plans. These are system reforms. These are not the cost of school uniform or something like that. These are big plans. If the government doesn't address them, there are billions of pounds black hole for the current system at the moment. We've put forward positive solutions. We're talking to those in government. We've now had a reshuffle. We've got, certainly in the education team, we've got some bright, smart people. So I really want to see change. I want to see these plans rocket boosted, and I want to see them done now. If not, you know, this is going to get worse and worse and worse. Already, severe absence is getting worse since lockdown. More children not going to school. The most vulnerable are not getting a good deal. People want change, and we need change for parents. But for me, for children, we've got to do this for children.
Absolutely. Well, Dame Rachel D'Souza, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you, as always. Now, a different story to end the hour. Stargazers across the world have been treated to a rare spectacle. A total lunar eclipse resulted in a blood moon dominating the sky for the first time since 2022.
Yeah, this was
I haven't
the
seen
view.
this. I hope there's a picture coming.
No, we were tucked up in bed, but this was the view from parts of London where viewers could catch a glimpse of the phenomenon during a partly clouded moon there. The weather wasn't the right...
When I heard blood moon, I thought it was going to be red.
No, there are better pictures coming up.
OK.
So this is Jerusalem.
OK.
So this is still very spectacular. It's rising over the dome of the rock in the old city. But this is what we've all been waiting for, Wilf.
OK.
It's the view...
Where is...
From the night sky. It's coming up. This is over Jerusalem. But Cyprus, I thought, was pretty spectacular. There's the blood moon you're looking for.
It's a hint of red.
Yeah.
It was just about worth the wait. But we're out of time here, and we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on today's show. Australia's most talked about case in decades comes to a close. Mushroom killer Aaron Patterson is sentenced to life in prison.
Plus, French politics in crisis. We'll find out why the government there could fall today.
And say goodbye to summer. Forecasters warn of rain, gales and floods ahead.
It's Monday the 8th of September. Your headlines. Triple murderer Aaron Patterson is sentenced to life in prison and will serve at least 33 years.
Your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage.
Could Madeline McCann have been killed in a hit and run? Sky News tracks down the woman at the centre of the investigation. New Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood meets with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance on how to stop people smuggling. Very good morning to you. It was the small-town murder that became Australia's most talked-about case in decades. Aaron Patterson has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years for killing her estranged husband's family with poisoned mushrooms that she foraged herself and served in a beef Wellington. Outside court, the sole survivor of the deadly lunch thanked police for their professional, efficient and effective investigation. Nicole Johnson has this report.
Convicted triple murderer Aaron Patterson has been sentenced to a life behind bars. She must serve at least 33 years.
Your offending involved an enormous betrayal of trust. Your victims were all your relatives by marriage. More than that, they had all been good to you and your children over many years, as you acknowledged in your testimony.
The public interest so great that for the first time in its history, Victoria's Supreme Court allowed the sentencing to be broadcast live. The judge saying Patterson attempted an elaborate cover-up.
Instead of informing those treating the Pattersons and Wilkinsons that you had used foraged mushrooms, which you could have done without having to admit that you had deliberately poisoned their meals, you repeatedly denied foraging, insisting that the mushrooms for the beef Wellingtons were sourced solely from Woolworths and an Asian grocery.
Aaron Patterson murdered her estranged husband's family at a lunch in July 2023, where she fed them a beef Wellington pie laced with toxic death cap mushrooms. Her father and mother-in-law, Gail and Don Patterson, were killed. Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, also died, though her husband, Ian Wilkinson, survived after a liver transplant. He spoke outside the court.
I want to say thank you to the many people from across Australia and around the world who, through their prayers and messages of support, have encouraged us. I thank the people of the Leongatha and Carramborough communities in particular. Your thoughtfulness and care has been a great encouragement to us.
Justice Christopher Bill said Patterson lied that she had cancer, lied that the mushrooms accidentally ended up in the mill, gave police a dummy phone and was vague about going to an Asian grocery store.
Your failure to exhibit any remorse pours salt into all the victims' wounds. The children of your direct victims speak of the distress of watching their parents suffer in hospital.
Justice Bill said Aaron Patterson has robbed her children of their grandparents and may, for her own protection, spend years in solitary confinement.
Well, Nicole joins me from Sydney now. Nicole, the sentence is, what, largely as expected? I would imagine it's clearly significant. Is it significant by Australian standards?
It was expected that she would get life in prison. The big question was about how long the non-parole period would be. It's 33 years. So Aaron Patterson is 50 years old. She won't be eligible to get out of jail until she's well into her 80s. But this case has captivated the nation here. People have been tuning into daily podcasts. 2 years of investigations, a 9-week trial, 6 days of jury deliberations. It seems like it's all come to an end today. But I don't think it's quite over yet, and that's because a television series is still to come. Netflix is also looking into the case. There's still a great deal of interest in this story in Australia and beyond, for that matter. But the real tragedy is in Leongatha, this tiny town in rural Victoria that has been in the middle of this extraordinary case. Multiple generations have been affected, multiple families. And as Justice Bill said, they will now have to live with that trauma and the difficulty of trying to come to terms with that for decades to come.
Nicole, as always, thanks so much. Now, more than 1,000 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats on Shabana Mahmood's first day as Home Secretary. She's accused people smuggling gangs of wreaking havoc. Will today hold her first major engagement with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance on border security. Well, our political correspondent Tamara is here with us. Tamara, it's interesting in the conversation we had with the government this morning with Defence Minister Luke Pollard. It was a lot of the same rhetoric. Very much focused on agreements with people in Europe and smashing the gangs. But maybe that's a bit unfair because clearly Shabana Mahmood hasn't come out and set out her stall as Home Secretary yet.
Well, what a day to start as Home Secretary with 1,097 people crossing the Channel in small boats to the UK, 17 boats. That takes the total this year to over 30,000, and that is a record since the small boats crisis started in about 2018. It's about a third higher at this point than last year. So all the things the government talked about, as you say, smashing the gangs, returning people, and they are returning large numbers of people, none of it is getting the numbers down. So I think the question for Shabana Mahmood, who is widely acknowledged in government to be a very shrewd operator, she's prepared to do difficult things politically, is how can she do things differently to Yvette Cooper, who talked about negotiated returns agreements, tried to increase prosecutions of smuggling gangs. Is she, with Keir Starmer's backing, is that going to be there to perhaps reopen conventions, look again at the sort of right to family life? Are all these things going to be up for grabs? She's meeting other interior ministers from our Five Eyes allies, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US. They're going to be talking about the global trafficking trade, which affects everyone. But in the UK context, it's the small boats and it's people being put up in hotels, which Keir Starmer knows is going to be politically hugely important for him if he's going to see off a challenge from reform.
What about a challenge within his party from the left wing of the party as this deputy leadership battle picks up?
Yeah, this is really interesting. So Angela Rayner stepped down from all her jobs, including deputy leader of the Labour Party, which is an elected position. Today we'll be told how that contest to replace her will be run, how long it's going to be. The people who throw their hat in the ring for that position do have to get a lot of support because they need to get 20% of the Parliamentary Labour Party, which is now huge. So that's about 80 MPs. So it's a high bar. But I think the question is whether this becomes a kind of referendum on Keir Starmer's leadership and whether the left of the party, who see his current direction and the changes in cabinet as a bit tacking to the right, whether they put up a candidate that gets widespread support. We've already had Emily Thornberry say she's thinking about it. Other figures on the left of the party are being talked of, but it is a high bar to reach, and it may be that they are not given very long in order to reach it if the contest is happening on quite a quick timetable.
Tomorrow, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. A reminder, by the way, on the topic of immigration, Sky News is holding the immigration debate. It'll be in Birmingham on Wednesday, the 10th of September. It's going to be hosted by Trevor Phillips. There'll be representatives from all of the major parties there. Do scan the QR code on your screen right now if you'd like to take part in it, submit a question or be part of the live audience, and indeed ask a live question. Nearly 900 people were arrested over the weekend.
Yeah, this was in an act of mass civil disobedience against the government's decision to ban Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, said that people could show their support in opposition to the war in Gaza without supporting Palestine Action. On this programme, Jeremy Corbyn described those arrested as people of principle and people of courage and hinted that he could join future protests.
They're people of principle and they're people of courage, and they are appalled that civil disobedience should become an act of terrorism.
It sounds to me like you are encouraging people, or certainly applauding them for taking this step, which is essentially applauding them for breaking the law, but you're not doing it yourself on an issue you care about. So how do we square those two things? If this is the right course of action of people to protest the broader issue, despite the legitimate points from the Defence Secretary of the nuance that you could do it in another way, why aren't you doing it yourself?
I'm at lots of protests, and I'll carry on being at lots of protests. Look, let's look.
But you encourage people to break the law.
No, I said I respected them for going there. I respected their principles. I know quite a lot of the people who are there, constituents of mine. They're people of deep moral conviction and principle. Can't we just accept that there are people of deep moral conviction who are not prepared to see fellow citizens made into terrorists because they protested against the bombardment of children in Gaza? Can't the government think for a moment, maybe they've just got it wrong on this legislation?
But you won't go that far yourself.
Let's see what happens.
Well, Tamara's standing by watching that clip there of Jeremy Corbyn, of course, Wilf's conversation. What did you make of his stance, Tamara?
Well, it's interesting that he's not gone on the protests himself, because the people who go and support Palestine Action are aware that it's a prescribed group and they are at risk of being arrested. And in fact, 17 of the people arrested were arrested for alleged assaults on police officers that we saw on Saturday. The new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is very supportive of this ban. She has said in her first day in the job, supporting Palestine and supporting a prescribed terrorist group are not the same thing. And the government has talked about the fact that there is a bigger security picture behind this ban than they're able to talk about publicly. Jeremy Corbyn called it civil disobedience, what they've done in terms of breaking into RAF bases and so on, as if that's something that he feels should be fine. The government are very, very determined to press ahead with this, despite the hundreds of arrests that are happening every time.
There's an additional point, which is that yesterday, in his interview on Trevor Phillips's programme, John Healey suggested that they had information that suggested they were planning other acts of similar violence, which obviously has not really been shared, and maybe they're not able to for security reasons. That could help clear a lot of this up for all sorts of people who are sort of watching from the sidelines. The other little thought I had, which I only thought about as we watched it back, is, and this isn't the core issue at hand, but in terms of the scale of headache this creates for the government or not, is whether or not Jeremy Corbyn joining the next protest and getting arrested himself would actually be terrible for the government, or whether it would sort of help them clear up what's right and wrong here. I mean, it's a tough one.
I'm sure that he's considered that idea. You're right that they have not been very open about the reasons behind this. Yvette Cooper, when she was the Home Secretary, gave interviews in which she sort of hinted at it and said the security services have given the government advice that this is the right course of action. A lot of people will perhaps look at what they did in terms of vandalising RAF planes and thinking no one got killed, no one got hurt. It cost the taxpayer, we're told, £7 million. They've committed other acts called vandalism. The government say that this is really a group that they are concerned about. There's a lot we don't know about how they're funded and how they're organised, but the government point out that there's nothing stopping people going on peaceful marches to support the Palestinian cause, just not for this group.
Tamara, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Let's take viewers through the day's other news now. And France is facing the possibility of having its fifth Prime Minister in less than 2 years, with French MPs set to debate a confidence vote in François Bayrou this afternoon. The vote follows strong opposition to a proposed budget that would save around £40 billion in an attempt to avoid a drastic debt crisis. The TUC General Secretary, Paul Novak, will urge the government not to water down legislation on workers' rights. In his speech to Congress today, he's also calling for a windfall tax on the banks to fund scrapping the two-child benefit cap. Mr Novak will be on this programme a little later on, around 9:20. Authorities in New Zealand believe a man who's been on the run for nearly 4 years with his 3 young children has been shot and killed by police. Tom Phillips disappeared with his children in December 2021. Officers were responding to reports of an armed robbery in the small town of Waikato. Authorities have located all 3 children. Prince Harry is back in the UK for the first time in 5 months. The royal will attend several events, including today's World Child Awards, an annual charity event for seriously ill children. It's not known if Harry will meet his father or brother during the visit. Christian B., the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeline McCann, is set to be released from a German prison next week after serving time for an unrelated crime. He's not been charged in the McCann case and denies any involvement. His release comes as new details have emerged of another suspect, an unnamed German woman who at one point was investigated by authorities who believed she had killed the missing girl in a drunk driving incident. We'll speak to Martin in just a moment about how he tracked her down, but first, this is his report.
The Madeline McCann suspect, Christian B., as he's known under privacy laws, is about to be freed from a German jail at the end of a sentence for rape. He's still being investigated over the Madeline case, but he's not been arrested or charged. Madeline vanished in Portugal in 2007. She was on a family holiday in Praia de Luz. One of the village's oldest residents who met the McCann family says everyone in Luz wants to see the case solved.
It still affects people. This was always a safe place. After so many years, it would be good if they solved the case. Only Christian B knows if he killed her or not.
For 6 years, the German drifter has been suspected of abducting and killing Madeline, but there's only circumstantial evidence against him, so he'll be released within days.
We don't want to investigate forever. If there's nothing more to investigate, or if we don't think that we will find some more evidence, then we will stop the investigation, and then we have to decide if we could charge Christian B. or not.
Madeline McCann was nearly 4 when she disappeared. She was asleep in a rented apartment at the Ocean Club. She was in a room with her younger twin siblings, and the patio door was left unlocked. Their parents were dining with friends on the complex 60 yards away. There have been many suspects over the years, but they were cleared. In 2018, Sky News was told of a new theory being investigated by Portuguese and British police. We didn't run the story at the time. The theory was this, that Madeline woke up in the family's holiday apartment and managed to open the patio door. Then she wandered out in the dark, stepped into the street, and a passing car hit her and killed her. The suspected driver, we were told, was a German woman who may have been drinking. Police believed she panicked and drove off with the body. We identified the woman and rang her in Germany. She said she wasn't aware she'd ever been investigated as a suspect. The woman told me that German police had called her and she'd been talking to them for over a year, but only about whether she had ever seen Christian B. hanging around the McCann's holiday apartment. But she also said that the German police asked her for the SIM card from her Portuguese phone. She said, "Why didn't my friends tell me and call me about this? Do you think I ran her over? I didn't even have a car at the time." Local reports alleged the woman may have borrowed a car. Madeline's mother, Kate, has long insisted her daughter was not strong enough to open a door and 2 gates to get out of the apartment on her own. German police have never formally questioned Christian B. He denies any involvement in Madeline's disappearance.
Yeah, really fascinating case. Martin's here with us now. So zone in on that hit-and-run theory, Martin. When did that come to light?
The idea that Madeline had walked out on her own was something that was explored initially. In fact, that was the first reaction when the police turned up, trying to calm the family, saying, look, she's probably walked out. Kate McCann has long said that that would have been very, very difficult for her. It first emerged as a serious theory about 7 years ago, 2018. And it was really something that the Portuguese police explored. And the suspect was a German woman who'd many years before, had gone back to live in Germany. And the Portuguese police asked the Germans to get involved and mount some kind of undercover operation against the woman. But by that stage, Christian B had emerged as a much more likely candidate, suspect. So the Germans apparently refused to get involved. But the intriguing thing is the woman, when I spoke to her, said, well, I did get a call out of the blue from the German police 7 years ago. And they ostensibly asked me about Christian B, but then they asked for her SIM card, as I said in the report. The SIM card she used in her Portuguese phone all those years ago in 2007. And to my mind, that rather suggests that they were fishing for something more than information and a possible connection of whether she knew Christian B. It looked like they were far more interested in what she was doing and who she was calling around the time that Madeline disappeared, and trying to get some idea of her movements on the night.
Really interesting, as is obviously details around Christian B as well. And well worth watching Martin's full report, which is available if you scan the QR code on your screen right now. Martin, thanks so much, and thanks to Leah as well for those details. Time to speak to the opposition now, and joining me is the Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Andrew Griffiths. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
A big reshuffle, obviously, towards the end of last week in the government. Some are suggesting that this might lead the government to tack to the centre a little bit, to soften the workers' rights bills being talked about, to try to reform welfare once again and possibly change the tack towards small boats and toughen the stance there. Would you welcome those changes if that happened?
Yeah, would welcome all of those changes. What I say to the government is, look, it's time to put the national interest first. There's no issue bigger than the economy. And there's something more important for individuals than their chance of a job to, in many cases, young people get on that employment ladder for the very first time. So the Employment Rights Bill, or the Unemployment Rights Bill, every business group has opposed that. The government's own impact assessment says it's going to cost jobs as well as growth in the economy. So I'm asking the government to put the national interest first, take them at their word. They were out there talking about the weekend. Peter Carr, the new business secretary, was talking about the importance of growth. This is an anti-growth measure. It's not about giving individual workers rights. There's a long-standing settlement in the UK about that. Tony Blair never saw fit to bring this sort of bill forward, nor did Gordon Brown. And on a day when most of London, our capital city, will be ground to a halt through strikes, the last thing we need to do is to be making strikes easier to call, longer, shorter notice for those that are impacted by them. Let's get on. Let's focus on growing the economy. Let's certainly, where we can all agree, let's get behind and do that. And really, the last thing we need is this 330-page red tape employment bill.
Peter Carr has gone straight to the US. Do you welcome that, particularly ahead of the state visit?
Yes, the US is one of our largest trading partners. It's the second largest economy in the world. And of course, the state visit is an opportunity, I hope, to make good on a lot of the promise of trade deals with the US. I want to see frictions removed wherever they can, whether it's tariffs or non-tariff barriers. And the UK economy has a huge amount to benefit from doing that.
The Bank of England decision due next week as well during the state visit. A lot of talk that they might reduce the pace of quantitative tightening, which might in turn give the government a little helping hand in terms of interest rates at the long end. Is that something that you would support them in doing if that is indeed their decision?
Yeah, I mean, we're supposed to be fairly cautious about getting too much involved in decisions that the central bank take, but I've always thought that the pace at which the Bank of England pursued quantitative tightening was wrong. It was actually wrong to carry on quantitative easing, money printing for far too long. But you don't remedy that mistake by then going too quickly in the opposite direction. And no other central bank pursued what was called quantitative tightening at the same pace. So if they do that and they give the Chancellor more headroom, she shouldn't just use and spend that money in a profligate way, because there are no, there's no margins of error on the level of national debt, on the cost of interest and borrowing that this government's continuing to make worse. It's not just on their watch, but it's certainly they're continuing to go in the wrong direction.
In terms of the small boats crisis, clearly the government is going to look at using more military land to give adequate housing, I think was the word that the Defence Minister Luke Pollard used this morning. Is that something you support, or is it just as much of a problem for local communities to see these places in their backyard?
Yeah, it's a different form of sticking plaster. And whether it's your local hotel, whether it's private rented accommodation in your town, the cost of which is being driven prohibitively high because the Home Office or your local authority are chasing down the cost of that, or whether it's your local military base and our hard-pressed military having to, on some level, deal with that. All of those are the wrong solution. The government should, if they're serious about a reset, adopt our deportation bill. They're going to have to look at the legal system, including but beyond the ECHR. The way in which our courts has interpreted that is making it very, very hard to return people who really don't have a right to be here. And of course, nobody should be coming here from France, which is a safe country. Interesting menu choices, but they do have human rights. If people are being persecuted, France itself is a safe country.
Andrew Griffith, thanks so much for joining us. So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to be talking to Sam and Anne about the crazy final few days of last week in British politics and what it means for the rest of the year.
It's the country's #1 issue right now. Many are alarmed about their changing communities.
It's an invasion, isn't it?
I think that solution comes through dialogue, not ranting off.
We don't know who they are. I don't think that there's an issue.
But are the people who matter listening? We'll bring key leaders together to debate the crisis that's dividing the nation. The immigration debate on Sky News. Get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. We've got a bit of breaking news for you. It's just crossed, coming from the Israeli ambulance service, saying at 10:13 a.m. reports were received that in Jerusalem there was approximately 15 casualties from a shooting at the Ramot Junction on Yigal Yadin Street in Jerusalem. This has been reported now by a number of different places, but that statement coming from Israel's ambulance service reporting 15 casualties in a shooting in Jerusalem, and we'll bring you more on that when we have it. The Israeli police adding that several were injured in this shooting, that terrorists have been neutralised. Unclear if that 15 casualties number that we were saying coming across from this statement refers to those being injured or worse, but that's the wording of the statements from both the ambulance service and the police in Israel so far. Let's get you up to speed on all today's other stories now. Liz got that for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. An Australian woman who murdered 3 relatives and attempted to kill another by serving poisonous mushrooms at a family lunch has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 33 years. 50-year-old Erin Patterson, who maintains her innocence, was previously found guilty of serving lethal death-capped mushrooms inside a beef Wellington. The prime suspect in the Madeline McCann investigation, Christian B, is set to be released from a German prison after serving time for an unrelated offence. It comes as Sky News has spoken to a German woman who was once suspected of being involved in the disappearance after details recently come to light of an old hit-and-run theory. And Shabana Mahmood is hosting a meeting with the US and other members of the Five Eyes Security Alliance today in her first major engagement as Home Secretary. Border security and tackling people smuggling gangs is expected to be the main focus of the meeting. And nearly 900 people were arrested over the weekend in an act of mass civil disobedience against the government's decision to ban Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. On this programme, Jeremy Corbyn described those arrested as people of principle, people of courage, and hinted that he could join future protests.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's just recap that breaking news that we brought you moments ago, that Israel police are saying several have been injured in a shooting in Jerusalem. They also say that terrorists have been neutralised. Meanwhile, the ambulance service there has said there were approximately 15 casualties. We're not quite sure of the definition of that word at this point, and that this took place around the Ramot Junction on Yigal Yadin Street in Jerusalem. We'll bring you more on that when we have it. Right, let's talk about all of the week ahead's domestic politics with the latest episode of Sky's Politics at Sam and Anne's podcast. Out, of course, already this morning. To chat us through what we can expect, we're joined by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, and Anne McElvoy, the Head of Podcasting at Politico. Very good morning to you both. Sam, so I thought it was a Monday-Thursday podcast. You were dropping some over the weekend as well.
Yeah, and what we decided to do with Politico is do a new type of debrief edition. So particularly after the leaders' speeches, Nigel Farage gave his Reform UK speech on Friday. We were always going to do an episode, but then everything just sort of tumbled downhill, and we ended up with a jumbo edition to wrap in everything that happened on an extraordinary day in British politics.
Extraordinary, and I enjoyed listening to that on Saturday morning, and with so much to get to, you actually did manage to keep it in that bite-sized length, sort of 20, 25 minutes, which I always enjoy. To step back from it all, I mean, with the dust settling on us, is these appointments and little bits of talk here and there, which, you know, we get from podcasts like yours. Are they going to water down the workers' rights bill? Are they going to, you know, alter policy here or there? Is this attack to the centre from this government or not?
I think it's going up a gear. I think it is a change of direction. It is not just a change of faces. I think there will be a change of policy now to accompany with it. Now, I'm going to give you 3 areas where I think that's broadly true and where there's a difference of not just emphasis but outcome. I think that there is going to be another attempt to get growth going. I think that with Emma Reynolds going into the Environment Department, I think you're going to see a big push on blockages for growth that I think under potentially even under Steve Reed wasn't going to happen. So taking on international conventions and the kind of things that we've been reporting on Sky. Workers' rights, you mentioned that. I think the steer from number 10 and the new business secretary has been so strong that the bill will stay intact. I think it's quite hard, even post-reshuffle they've been saying that. I think it's quite hard for them to undo that. In the longer term, there's quite a lot of power in the business department to maybe delay some of the consultations, string this out. So I don't think it's out of the woods, but I don't think the legislation is the thing that the unions down in Brighton today need to worry about. And then we've got the question of what's going on with that switch from Yvette Cooper to Shabana Mahmood in the Home Office. We'll hear from Shabana Mahmood a little bit later this morning. An example of where they differ on policy I was given was, I think Yvette Cooper was much more reluctant to come around to this idea of digital identity cards. Shabana Mahmood, I think she is much more hardcore that that kind of solution is the right one. So that's where their instincts and their policy instincts will diverge.
In terms of, and the reshuffle, whilst we just dwell on that as well, what do you make of the fact that Yvette Cooper has lost one of the most important jobs in government, but got another one? And where does that imply that the Prime Minister stands on policy towards small boats in particular?
I think on the policy towards small boats and also the way that the argument was playing out in public, which was really not to the government's advantage. The numbers were clearly running against the government on that, and there's very high volumes of boats still coming across the channel. But it wasn't just that, Wilfred. It was really everything to do with the vibe, the tone, the fact that Yvette Cooper was perhaps coming across as someone... She talked a lot about having to manage things carefully, and while that is clearly true, you don't want to mismanage things. There is also, I think, a sense of urgency that Shabana Mahmood brings to this, which the Prime Minister concluded was more where he needed to be in terms of the public debate and being harried relentlessly by Reform, also by the Conservatives, over getting a solution to this problem. And we saw immediately then there's announcements coming thick and fast about those who are in asylum hotels being rehoused in army barracks and the like, you know, the sort of less, sort of slightly more punitive tone on that whole business. And I think he just came to conclude that Shabana Mahmood was just more authentic in that and in some of her plain speaking than Yvette Cooper. But Yvette Cooper is a senior figure. There's also a bit of Keir Starmer that doesn't really like conflict. So what you've seen there is a kind of Buggins turn for a lot of senior people, that they get moved around. He's less comfortable, I think. There are some people who be moved out, but he's less comfortable about doing that with a big beast. And in fairness to Yvette Cooper, she has shadowed this role before. She will have a really interesting job there at the Foreign Office because she comes much more from a Home Office kind of security first background in her recent incarnation. And there's quite a lot of tension there. But well, does that mean we're sort of tougher on China? You know, we basically see them as a kind of peer enemy in the way that we see, say, Russia or Iran? Or do we just need to get business out of the Chinese, which has been the government's previous position and certainly Rachel Reeves's position? So in a sense, when you solve one problem, you then create another one because you get a different vibe also at the Foreign Office.
Sam, a lot of people have then therefore framed Shabana Mahmood as the big winner of the reshuffle. But isn't Darren Jones the biggest winner?
I mean, it's the triumph of all the deputies. There are lots of cooks at the centre of government, some of them in big cabinet positions like Shabana. Darren Jones seems to be the guy pulling the strings. For ages, we talked about Pat McFadden being at the heart of the engine room of this government. He's not there anymore. He's doing potentially another go at welfare reform, but he's not by Keir Starmer's side anymore. Keir Starmer has picked somebody new. When you look back at Darren Jones before he joined Keir Starmer's front bench, he was quite implicitly critical of the Labour leadership. So it's quite an interesting sort of transition to have somebody who was like that just three and a half years ago, now really being your enforcer at the heart of government. Shabana Mahmood, when you read her interview in the Sunday Times a week ago, and she was leaning into a more aggressive vision of government than I would expect to hear from Keir Starmer itself. So you've got all of these people, you're right, who are big winners, and it's hard to pick between the biggest winner. And in some senses, it doesn't really matter. But what I do feel like is that Keir Starmer is letting other people define him. He doesn't fill the space himself with a vision. Instead, he is letting these big figures, whose politics I never completely thought overlapped with his, to do the running in areas of massive and critical importance.
And how big a headache is the deputy leadership race for the Prime Minister?
Well, it's a headache insofar as it's something that people are going to be talking about when Keir Starmer wants to talk, just picking up there on what Sam said, is how does this redefine him, his government? One person we haven't talked much about over the whole weekend really is Keir Starmer, and where it leaves him. It's almost as if he has these characters who, in a way, speak for him and are intended to represent the government. But you can't have a government that's, you can't have a prime minister, put it another way, without the word prime in it. So I think what he really wants to do is reestablish that authority. Once you have noises off in a deputy leader contest in the Labour Party, well, I've compared it on the podcast to therapy. Everything comes out. You could say it doesn't matter an awful lot. So that job has been defanged. You've got David Lammy, who is more reliable from Keir Starmer's point of view as deputy prime minister. They're separate roles. But at the same time, you've just got weeks of people coming out and saying, oh, if I were you, I would do it differently. And we've seen this happen before. We've seen the way that the party apparatus and its internal convulsions can affect and infect the view of the government and also cast doubt on the authority of the Prime Minister. That's what I would see as the risk of this race.
I mean, I have two questions on this, Sam, to follow up on that. One is, does it show that deputy leader of the party, once you're in government, doesn't matter that much? Or at least maybe that's what the Prime Minister's trying to hope for. But does it also suggest that Deputy Prime Minister doesn't mean that much?
I mean, yes and yes. It'll be for historians, I'm going to tread carefully on this, it'll be for historians to determine how much impact they felt that Harriet Harman made in that period where she was deputy leader of the party, but not given the position of deputy prime minister when Gordon Brown was prime minister. I will say no more. But I think there's been a deliberate and quick attempt to cauterise this because I think Number 10 can smell trouble. One person who's a veteran of deputy leadership contests, who's run them before, said to me, you could win from the left if you made the entire contest about Palestine Action. There's a lot of, not amongst maybe the public, but in Labour circles, a huge amount of discontent about the prescribing, the banning of that particular organisation at a point of everything that we see that's going on in Gaza. And obviously we've got the breaking news on Jerusalem right now. But I think that there is a sense that that issue could dominate a deputy leadership contest, which is the last thing that Keir Starmer would want to see.
Stepping back from it all, Sam, and what we might now see in the next 6 to 12 months with this reshuffle. I mean, if you've got Pat McFadden sent out to try welfare reform again, if there is less stringent support for workers' rights, obviously we've got the all-important budget to come as well. Do you think there is going to be a big moment, a second big moment, because of obviously the past attempts to reform welfare bill, of a clash between the government and the left of the party? And can he survive it being very close again?
Look, I think you're right to sort of pull the camera back, because for me, there is only one event this autumn. It is the budget on the 26th of November. That is where they've got to work out how to fill the 20 to 30 billion pound black hole. There has been a lot of concern in the market about how sustainable our levels of borrowing are, given everything, not least welfare. I'm sure they will come back and have another go. Number 10 wouldn't confirm that, but they say Pat McFadden needs to think about the new brief. And that will take Keir Starmer in conflict again to his MPs who are not in the sort of most relaxed frame of mind, given where they are in the polls, given their electoral prospects, given what they have watched the Prime Minister do, which is another panic reshuffle. Maybe it had been planned for a long time, but it was still the consequence of the loss of one of the most important figures in his government. Are there going to be clashes to do stuff and a drive from Number 10 to do stuff the party doesn't want? Yes. Will he win on second time? Maybe. But the scale of the economic problems dwarf anything else. So I think that is the test, whether or not we get through the budget and whether or not there's a backlash to that fundamentally will be the test of whether or not this reshuffle was a success and therefore with it this government.
Sam, Anne, as always, a pleasure. Thanks so much. Make sure to subscribe to Politics at Sam and Anne's if you have not done so already. Right, let's give you an update on that breaking news out of Jerusalem that we brought you 10 or 15 minutes ago. There are reported to be 15 casualties as a result of a shooting. The paramedic agency, a paramedic of the name Nadav Tayeb from the Israeli Ambulance Service said, "We arrived at the scene in large numbers immediately after receiving the report of shooting casualties. When we got there, we saw people lying on the road unconscious near the sidewalk in a bus stop. There was widespread destruction at the scene, shattered glass on the ground and great commotion. We began providing medical treatment to the injured, and we are continuing at this time to treat the wounded and evacuate them to hospitals." That statement coming in moments ago. We'll get you more on that when we have it. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to be talking about the French vote of confidence that will take place today and what it means for you.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Oof. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that.
She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. A reminder of the breaking news that we've brought you in the last half an hour or so, which is that Israel's ambulance service is treating 15 casualties of a shooting in Jerusalem over the course of the last 20 minutes or so. We've had various updates, and it does appear that paramedics have said 6 people are in a serious condition, and police saying that 2 attackers were neutralised soon after the shooting began. It took place at a major intersection at the northern entrance to Jerusalem on a road that leads to some Jewish settlements located in East Jerusalem. We'll bring you more on it when we have it, but those updates coming in from both the police and the ambulance service there in Israel.
Now, French Prime Minister Francois Bayrou faces a crucial vote of confidence today, with his job on the line after a backlash against his budget. Let's get more on the situation in France then with Claire Pacalin, a reporter at France 24. Claire, bring viewers up to date. What can we expect to happen today? Morning.
Morning. Well, things are not looking good at all for the French Prime Minister, Francois Bayrou. We expect him to speak in Parliament at around 3 p.m. Paris time. He will be appealing for one last time to members of Parliament, to the deputy there, asking for their support. But the maths just doesn't work for him when it comes to who has what and how many seats in Parliament. Parliament is very, very divided. We have this big left-wing bloc, which is made up of far-left parties as well as the more moderate socialists. They've all said they will not support Francois Bayrou today. The far right, so Marine Le Pen's party, has also said they will not support him today. So that leaves him with just a handful of support in the centre and the right as well. And it's looking like that just won't be enough for him to keep his job. And the backlash, of course, as you said, Leah, coming from that budget that he put forward earlier in the summer. Francois Bayrou wants to reduce France's debt. And to do that, he's put forward a raft of different austerity measures. They've gone down like a lead balloon with the French public, but also with generally on the political spectrum. And that one measure that everyone here is talking about in France and that everyone remembers is that Francois Bayrou has suggested getting rid of 2 bank holidays in France to get French people doing more work, helping businesses, more tax to the government, and helping to bring down France's debt. And you can imagine getting rid of 2 bank holidays is something that just has not set well at all with the politicians, but also with the French public.
So what would happen next, Claire, in terms of, assume he loses this, do we then have parliamentary elections again, but obviously not presidential elections? And fast forward a little bit, if, say, a real clear majority against Macron won the next parliamentary elections, what would happen in the remaining period of his presidential term?
Well, there are a few things that could happen. And the most likely we're looking at now is that Francois Bayrou, if he loses, which is what we're expecting, we should get the result this evening of that confidence vote, he will have to resign. His ministers will take on a caretaker role until Emmanuel Macron, the French president, chooses a new prime minister. Now, the far right, so Marine Le Pen's party, is calling for Emmanuel Macron to call snap parliamentary elections because she thinks that she and her party have a good chance of coming out very well, even better than the parliamentary elections which Emmanuel Macron called last year. And that would therefore force Emmanuel Macron to choose a prime minister from the ranks of the far right, and that we expect would be Jordan Bardella. But we're not, the trickle of information that we're getting from the Élysée Palace, from the presidential palace, is that the French president has no intention of calling snap parliamentary elections now. What he is most likely to do is choose another prime minister. But then who can that be? He's tried already 2 centrists. Francois Bayrou, very much a centrist. Before him, we had Michel Barnier, who many people will remember was that chief Brexit negotiator with the EU. Now, Michel Barnier was, I remember standing outside the Élysée Palace a year ago, almost to the day, as we were waiting for Emmanuel Macron to name the next prime minister. We didn't know who it was going to be. He named Michel Barnier, and Michel Barnier didn't last until Christmas. I remember again standing at Matignon, which is the prime minister's office here in France, as Michel Barnier handed over power to Francois Bayrou. Francois Bayrou said, I will bring down France's debt. That is an absolute priority for me. But we're looking at less than 9 months later, and he's not managed to do that. So who will Emmanuel Macron choose? It seems likely that he's going to go a bit to the left. So perhaps a socialist politician or a former socialist, someone he feels will not unpick all the reforms and the legislation that he has helped to bring in since he became president in 2017. But the big question will be, whoever he chooses, will they manage to get the support of Parliament? A very divided Parliament here in France.
Claire, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. We are going to have a quick look at the weather now. Well, we're in an unsettled spell, but southeastern England should stay mainly dry for a day or so. It's mostly fine now, although windy in the northwest, but showers are running into many western and southern Irish coasts. Shetland is drying up. Showers will develop much more widely, though, this morning, and some heavy, potentially thundery showers will emerge, but the eastern parts look fine. It'll be cooler and less windy generally, but gales are possible over northwestern coasts. The afternoon will bring little change, although eastern parts will see any showers fading later. The west will keep a scattering of potentially heavy showers into the evening. Most places look dry overnight, but southern and Irish sea coastal areas can expect further showers. Let's just bring you again an update on that breaking news from Jerusalem, where the ambulance service there have said there was a shooting that led to 15 casualties, with Israeli police adding that the attackers have now been neutralised. The latest development is that Israeli media are reporting there have been 4 people killed in the shooting. So just it does clarify that figure earlier, 15 casualties, obviously didn't imply people being killed. And the update on that is that within the 15, based on Israeli media reports, that 4 were killed in that shooting. As we said, the police do say the shooters have been neutralised. We'll bring you more when we do have it as it relates to that situation in Jerusalem. We've got about a minute left this hour of the programme. Tomorrow's back. And tomorrow, in terms of the day ahead, the new Home Secretary is doing what exactly today?
She is meeting with her counterparts in the Five Eyes. That's our security alliance with the US, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. They are meeting in London. This was pre-planned, but she's the brand new Home Secretary fronting it up to talk about the challenges around global migration, people trafficking, gangs. Of course, she has to get a grip on this issue. There she is with one of them there in the UK. And it's been a very difficult weekend with over 1,000 people coming over in small boats in one day alone on her first day on Saturday, taking the total to a record 30,000 this year.
Lots more to discuss after this short break here on The Breakfast Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with all of the day's top stories.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.